about ready? Okay. So we're at about 12:15, so it took us a little while to get set up. And maybe some other folks will join us as we go along, but I'm Deacon Leeann Culbreath. I live in Tifton. I'm a minister in the Episcopal Church. And I'm here today on behalf of Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, which is GIPL, is the acronym. And it's just easier to say GIPL so you don't confuse us with Georgia Power. We're not associated with Georgia Power. We try and help people save on their Georgia Power bills. Instead, we don't work hand in hand with them. GIPL is a statewide faith-based environmental organization helping congregations across the state improve their stewardship of God's creation, or however they describe it. And that's working with all faiths, including our Muslim friends, our Jewish friends, Buddhist, Christian. Of course, in South Georgia, the majority of the work is working among Christian churches. And so that's trying to help shine a light on environmental justice issues in Georgia, and working in South Georgia. Our main office is in Atlanta. So we wanted somebody on the ground who could connect with folks here and work on some issues that are important to us here and that affect everybody in Georgia, but that Atlanta folks tend to miss and not get involved in. Although I will say Atlanta folks right now are very focused on what's happening in South Georgia, especially as it pertains to coal ash. Georgia Water Coalition, which is a coalition of over 200 organizations, which WWALS is part of, and I'll introduce y'all in a minute, and GIPL is a part of, is focusing very hard this legislative session on coal ash. And there's some legislation we'll be talking about that is in committee this week, and we need some action on it. So that's why we pulled this together very quickly, because this is a critical time. This week is a critical time for moving forward with some good legislation to protect water from coal ash contamination. So what is coal ash? Coal ash is a byproduct, a waste product left over from burning coal for electricity. So once the coal is all burned off, you're left with an ash. It has a concentrate, it's like a concentrate of toxins that were in the coal, and it distills it. And it's arsenic, mercury, lead, and other heavy metals like selenium, chromium, all kinds of ions are in it. It is very toxic. However, and it can contribute to cancer, respiratory issues, neurological defects, birth defects. So it's of great concern to be exposed to it through the air or through your water. Where there are instances of coal ash contamination at power plants, communities, they have just found contamination in the water around those coal plants. So we know that it does seep out. The coal ash is piled at power plants into ponds or lagoons that are usually unlined. They're just put straight on, it's put straight on the ground. And if you know what happens when it rains, then it leaches down into the ground. And our drinking water source is the Floridan Aquifer, which is an underground, pristine water source, one of the largest aquifers in the world. So we have an awesome source of clean drinking water here in South Georgia, and we also share that with parts of Florida and I believe Alabama. And the aquifer's huge. What's that? Tennessee? So it can leach down into the groundwater and into the underground aquifer as well, and can contaminate that potentially. It also, if those ponds get too full right now, they will dewater, and so they will siphon water off of those ponds directly into waterways. So coal ash with arsenic, lead, and mercury is dumped directly into our rivers. Without treatment and without testing. So some of the legislation addresses that as well. So this is obviously a serious health concern, and right now they're in the process of closing down power plants and coal ash ponds. So that coal ash needs to go somewhere. It needs to go somewhere safer than where it is. But right now there aren't a lot of regulations about how to store it safely. So power companies and waste companies are looking at municipal landfills around South Georgia and other areas of Georgia to move this coal ash. And in some places, like we'll hear from Jessup, there is a proposal to move a lot of coal ash, 10,000 tons a day, into a wetland area, into a new, and they've already had a coal ash issue in Jessup, so we'll hear all about that in a moment. So this is an issue for all of us who live around landfills. who enjoy clean water because water travels. Our rivers move across district lines, across state lines, across county lines. Pollution travels too, and it can travel underground as well. In Lowndes County, and John may speak to this more clearly, that there is a landfill, a private landfill, correct? That has privatized landfill that has been accepting coal ash in Lowndes County since 2009. And potentially this is coal ash from the big Kingston, Tennessee spill. And
some of it certainly is.
Some of it certainly is. So there was a large, does anyone remember the coal ash spill in Kingston, Tennessee? Was it 2008?
TVA? Oh, yeah.
TVA, right. So they had a coal ash pond, dam burst. It was a huge disaster, and then that coal ash had to get moved to somewhere. Some of that came here. There are also, instances of, there was a big spill in the Dan River in North Carolina not too long ago that devastated that river and waterway, and that was connected to a drinking water source for many folks. So in communities where there's coal ash contamination, people have to rely on bottled water for drinking, and then, of course, concerned about bathing in it, bathing your children in it, and any kind of exposure to it. There can be air exposure to ash as well as it's transported on rail cars or in trucks in our communities. So there are a lot of concerns about it, but there's very little regulation around it. The EPA does not classify it as hazardous. It's not a hazardous waste, even though it's highly toxic. That allows it to move around more easily, but it can give a false sense of security that it's safe, and it's not safe. We have to be careful. The EPA has issued standards in 2015. They issued a coal ash rule, but it was standards and recommendations, but it doesn't have the force of law. It's self-enforced, or it's enforced by lawsuits from citizens or environmental groups or states. The EPD last year here in Georgia came out with a guidance document on coal ash, which is helpful, but again, it's not legally binding. That's self-enforced by the waste and utility companies. So we're looking at legislation now that would put into law some basic safety measures to get coal ash moved into dry, lined landfills that are not near waterways, not above aquifer recharge zones, areas where where it's more porous and water can leach down and recharge our aquifer and fill it back up. And that is not in wetlands areas. So that's a big concern, but where do we put it? We have it needs to go somewhere, especially in Georgia. Where do we put it? Out-of-state companies want to bring their coal ash to rural South Georgia, and struggling communities will often say yes, because it's a way to have some revenue for a struggling county and some jobs. So that's a concern as well, that we don't sell ourselves and our land and our future off to these companies. Coal ash basically doesn't, I was talking to my husband last night, who's a scientist, we talked about the lifespan yesterday in Tifton, about the longevity of some of these elements like arsenic or lead or mercury. How long will they persist in the environment if they're there in a landfill? They're pretty much going to be here for millennia. They don't go away. They're elements. So they don't just, they could do some chemical things, but they're not going to change that dramatically. They don't just sort of go away. It's not like in 50 or 100 years this will be a usable product that we can deem safe. So once it's here, it's here. Once it's in our water, it's in our water. And we have to deal with it. So we have some opportunities now in parts of South Georgia to prevent coal ash contamination. I think this is an opportunity to start some conversation in Lowndes County about the coal ash that is already present in your community, which we don't know a lot about, but I think we should be working together to find out some more about, whatever we can, and find out what kind of testing and monitoring is happening there. So there are some actions we can take after this on the state level, but also on the local level that we want to draw your attention to. I wanted to thank Reverend Rose and Serenity Church for giving us this space this morning, or this afternoon now. Thank you for opening it up on short notice and offering an opportunity to start this conversation. So thank you for your witness to the environment and to your community viewing this. And today with us we have John Quarterman and Gretchen Quarterman with WWALS, the Willacoochee, Withlacoochee, Alapahaw, Little River, Swanee, Watershed Coalition. Did I get them all? What's that?
Yeah, you don't have to say them all out though. You can just say WALS. That's our
The
name.
WALS Watershed Coalition. This
That's
watershed.
Yes.
Okay. And which is also Swanee River Keeper, and John is the Swanee River Keeper. Is that correct?
That's right.
That is correct. So.
See, Leeann knows everything.
Yeah, and then we also have with us two fabulous ladies from Jessup, Georgia, from No Ash at All, Betty and oh my gosh, Leslie.
Angela is the president of NAACP.
And we have Angela here from the president of NAACP in Lowndes County, correct? Or is it multi-county or just Lowndes County? Thank you for being here. We are all going to take some time to talk. You know, we each have a different aspect. You know, I'm here obviously with a collar on as a person of faith, and I'm here with concern for our health, for the suffering of others. To me, it's part of loving our neighbor and also protecting the gift of water that I believe was given to us in creation. And once the water that we had at the start of this earth, however you believe that happened, is all the water we have. It keeps recirculating, but we don't get new water. So what we do with our water and what we do with that gift is really important and critical for our future on this planet and for life. And it was given to give life, not to poison or to sicken any of us. And I'm sure we don't want to see any. We probably all our lives have touched people who are suffering with some of the ailments that are connected with things like coal ash and other toxins. And we don't want to see that kind of suffering in our world. So this is some ways that we can create a cleaner environment and offer a future for our children in these communities. Once you have a toxic dump in your community, it's really hard to bring in business. It's hard to keep kids here, to grow up and to want to settle here as adults and have children, have their own families here. So we really want to do whatever we can now to make this a place where we can be healthy and thrive and grow. Two little factoids I think are helpful. In Georgia is 8th in the nation for creating coal ash. It's also an acronym is CCR, coal combustion residuals. Lots of acronyms in this business. Annually, Georgia produces 6 million tons of coal ash a year, annually. 6 million tons a year. Okay, so this is also a call to transition to cleaner, more renewable forms of energy. Is part of what we do. You know, if you fish, does anybody here who like to fish or eat fish in the rivers? So, you know, obviously mercury, when mercury gets into our waterways and it bioaccumulates through the food chain, and then we end up getting a lot of mercury exposure, which we know is also not good for us, and we like to maintain our fishing traditions in South Georgia, as well as our drinking water. I think that's the main factoid, 6 million tons a year. Here's some other challenging, disturbing facts here shortly, especially what's happening in Jessup. But I think, John, if you want to go ahead and take some time to talk about our local waterways, and then we'll hear how coal ash is affecting another community in Georgia.
All right.
Any question before John starts? Or?
Yeah. Can you explain the difference between fly ash and bottom ash?
Fly ash and bottom ash.
One is lighter than the other, basically.
Well, fly ash is what goes up the stack, bottom ash is what goes down in the boiler. The fly ash is used in your concrete, your asphalt, anything in stores, building materials, with no restrictions.
The fly ash contains mercury, right?
None. It's used every day.
Well, some forms of coal ash are used in different products, like wallboard or in concrete, and they have found ways to reuse it. But we have so much of it that a lot of it's going to end up in permanent storage in landfills. But thank you.
To further the difference, because not all the coal ash is detrimental.
Well, we have mercury in our Alapahaw River, which is nowhere near a coal plant. It's generally considered to come from plant share.
From TVA.
Plant share up near Macon, the country's dirtiest coal plant.
Well, there are types of fly ash that have been put on fields before for fertilizer, but there have been problems with that, with toxins. We were talking about that last night with peanut crops around Tifton and what happened with that. So whether or not it's totally safe and doesn't contain any arsenic or lead or mercury, I don't know. I think it's something to, we don't want to put on our fields as we have before.
No,
We want to be careful
definitely
with it. But a lot of people think that they hear flash and go, oh, we've just always used that as fertilizer. That's not. We may or may not be talking about the same thing sometimes, so it's important. So, all right. So, John, do you need me to hit the lights for you?
Yes, please.